Okay, so this one is about the nature of care. And care has been an evolving experience for me. And it's only in the last sort of few months actually that I've really began to be able to discern the subtleties of it and the delicacy of it as an experience, as being on the receiving end of it, but also on the being, giving care. And so if you imagine a scenario within which you're faced with the situation and someone is in distress and you're aware that they need help, or that's your initial impulse, let's say. Your initial impulse is to help someone because you're noticing they're in a distress. They're sending a distress signal. If you act off that impulse, then that's being careless because you don't yet understand the source of that impulse. You don't understand where it's emerging from. And as a human being, we have impulses, but we can't just act from impulses. And so this is the first degree of care that we have the opportunity to introduce in a situation where there is distress. And that is by going inward. So you get the impulse to provide the care. So instead of projecting it and following the impulse, we self-reflect, direct the impulse inward, and then begin to discern. So as human beings, our impulses they come from the non-binary aspect of our nature, the unity aspect, where the observer has witnessed distress and there's a natural response, a signal. That care is provided, and if we follow the impulse, there's no discernment, there's no choice. And so when we act from impulse, it's extremely dangerous and careless if we solely act from impulse, because impulse is from a unified perspective. It doesn't acknowledge separation. It doesn't acknowledge things like death. Unity doesn't see a beginning or an ending. It's from its perspective, it's eternal. It's the wave function of reality. So distress signal, the response is to provide care. However, we have to self-reflect first, and then run it through the aspect of our nature that is polarized. So impulse equals unity, and then action equals separation. And so it seems paradoxical, but the first step in providing care in that situation is not to act from the impulse to provide care, is to direct that impulse inward and to then honor yourself in the situation, because you are a physical body, you are a human being, and your sole duty of care is to your physical body. Even legally, this is how it works, is your driver's license is bonded by the asset of your body. And so your duty is to provide care to yourself first and foremost. If you provide care to another human being and it costs you your life, then that's reckless, that's careless. You've averted the responsibility, you've averted the duty of care for yourself. And so we receive the impulse, we assess the situation and we discern whether to act on that impulse or whether to withhold that impulse or to do nothing. And so once we discern for ourselves, we can assess, okay, this person requires, they've sent a distress signal. I've directed that impulse internally. What other information do I need? What is the missing context for me to discern properly? And so this is where nothing is the tool. We pause and do nothing and allow the tension to get involved. If you don't allow yourself to feel the tension in the space, in the environment, then you are not interpreting the signals from your environment. And you're missing most of the context. And this is what we would call the somatic intelligence that's available based on tension. So, okay, if you pause and allow the silence before you act, then you can interpret the tension. You can say, okay, something's not right here. And so you may discern that that distress signal feels inauthentic. It feels like a feigned call for distress. And so we may discern that it actually feels inauthentic and this person's seeking pity rather than requiring care, right? And so in that context, the discernment comes in where we say, okay, if I was to provide care or to provide help or assistance, then I'm actually disempowering this person, because pity is crippling by nature. We are disempowering ourselves by seeking pity. Whereas if someone really needs help and care, someone using pity is seeking to avert responsibility for their own care. And so they're trying to resource care from the people around them because they're not honoring themselves in some way. And so the only way to imbue discernment to this degree, to this level of precision, is through silence and making peace and holding space for tension. And most people feel extremely uncomfortable sitting in silence, sitting in tension. And so to add another layer to this now, let's say, and this is how complex this kind of scenario can be, let's say we've brought the impulse inward. We've discerned that this person is seeking pity, and so it would be disempowering of me to help. And it would also be dishonoring myself because they're trying to resource me when they should be resourcing themselves. And then you notice there are people around you who are creating a sense of obligation and expectation for you to provide the care so that you can be seen as someone who is polite. And this politeness is the shadow nature of care. Politeness is not care. It is the act of being seen to be providing care. When in truth we are collapsing under the weight of a sense of obligation to be seen to be providing care. And so if you just pause and just let that settle in, what you'll see is that is an extremely toxic pattern. And some people they've enslaved themselves to it. And so that's a potential scenario, just to help you understand how these things can become enmeshed and murky. And we can really disempower ourselves by succumbing to the obligation of being seen to be polite. Whereas politeness is typically the most dishonoring thing we can do to ourselves. Politeness, the sense of feeling as though we have to be polite, is crippling ourselves. And so, care. What is care? So, the first thing about authentic care is the silence. Holding the tension, holding the space for the tension to give breath to the situation. Allow it to breathe so it can be felt, absorbed, and assimilated. That's the first step. So we're not trying to escape the tension. We're not trying to avert the tension. The next step is self-honoring. It is impossible for you to experience receiving care if you omit the honoring of the impact of your decisions on yourself to provide the care. We call this martyrdom or, self-sacrifice. That is profoundly dishonoring and careless toward yourself. And so that is careless. And be extremely wary of people who are overtly self-sacrificing and martyring themselves, because they have to resource care through pity, because they haven't taken responsibility for the duty of their own care through self-honoring. And so what happens, paradoxically, when we pause, when we honor ourselves in context of what's required in the situation, when we pause and allow the tension to be felt and experienced, paradoxically, all of a sudden we gain the headroom to provide the care. The headroom for the care exists within the tension when it's held. And the release of that tension gives us the free energy to provide the care as a gift. It gives us the bandwidth to provide the care. And this is one of the deepest, most intricate and beautiful aspects of reality that I've come to truly, I'm in awe of it, to be fair. And it's I've got a dear friend, Madison Farish, who's really helped me fine-tune and hone this skill. She has a consultancy, and she really goes deep with people to help them to deeply engage with life in these ways that are self-honoring and unlock so much free, abundant energy to be able to express love and care to ourselves and to other human beings. And so care. The other major limitation to care is actually guarding ourselves. So the fear of being seen to care. So sometimes care can bubble up, and it's quite an intimate experience to feel the sensation of receiving energy to show care to someone, because of people might think there's a romantic connotation or there's a sexual connotation or we're flirting, and so we don't want people to get the wrong idea, and so sometimes we get the natural inclination to express care, and then we withhold it because we don't want to, because of fear, because we don't feel safe. And so again, the solution to this, paradoxically, is to hold ourselves in that tension. And the most courageous thing we can do is to name that tension. And the naming of tension is where that care can be unlocked and released and expressed as free, abundant energy in the system. But that requires courage, and it's a real skill. And medicine is phenomenal at this as well. Just reach out to me if you want to connect with her. And so, in this context, the naming of the tension becomes the act of intimacy, actually. To be able to say to someone, listen, I really want to help, but I'm feeling, I want to name a tension, and that is that I'm afraid you'll take it the wrong way, that I might be advancing or seeking something romantic or whatever it might be. And my particular challenge with this is in business, because I'm a consultant and an advisor, and I form deep friendships with my clients, and a lot of the time what I'm doing is it's coming from free energy in the system, from care, like I'm doing something because I care, not because it's within my job description or because I'm getting paid for it, right? And it's challenging because if there's free energy in the system and I'm not charging for it, it's like, well, what am I going to do with it? You see? And so these are challenging things to navigate. And again, that's what medicine's been helping me with, is how to engage in formal agreements that are super clean, but hold the space for this dynamic to unfold naturally, for the care to naturally flow through the organization, as well as finances. And what we've found is that the protocol of honoring is the way to bring this in. So if you make it part of the culture, whereby when you sense an expression of care, then the receiver expresses the intent to honor the originator. And when you do this, then you can come back to it almost like as an expression of gratitude for receiving that care, is to honor it in some way, whether it's financial or otherwise. It's just to honor the receiving in that moment, so that you can properly receive it, basically. And it's especially challenging with innovation as well, whereby when you're experimenting and everyone's curious, and the curious energy, and there are shared ideas emerging, and then all of a sudden something starts landing and grounding and becoming crystallized into a product, and it's like, oh, who's the originator? Like, whose IP is this? And so it's really important to develop protocols that are honoring of contributors, originators, but more importantly, honoring where the free energy is flowing in the system, and to entrain spaces and dynamics within which the honoring will happen at some point, and that everyone trusts each other enough to know that coming to terms and entering into transactional relationships, it emerges out of the honoring, out of the culture of honoring. And this is how we imbue care into life. Self-honoring, honoring others, and allowing ourselves to receive free energy in the system, and having the courage to give free energy to others in the form of care when it's been given to us, even when it's scary. And what happened with me in particular is that I began to soften a lot and became far less guarded, and just really open and caring. And eventually you no longer feel ashamed for revealing your softness and expressing your care, because you're not feeling taken advantage of, because it's free energy in the system. Once you cultivate that skill of holding the tension until it naturally wants to be released, then you're just riding waves the whole time. And eventually you just end up becoming an edge rider, and you begin searching for the edge and where the tension is. And becomes habit forming. And everything starts to feel alive when you're no longer trying to, escape tension, discomfort, embarrassment, humiliation. And nothing healthier than a culture of everyone identifying and training spaces within which everyone feels safe to name the edges of the tension together in silence. And it just breeds intimacy and friendship, which is wonderful, as long as you've got high fidelity agreements, and there's nothing hidden, there's no hidden expectations, and that if any expectations do surface, that they're named. Otherwise, passive aggression enters the system, and that's nasty, toxic stuff. It's just basically, passive aggression just means people don't feel safe or comfortable enough to name their edges and to name their tension. And so it's everyone's responsibility to entrain the space so that everyone can feel safe to be vulnerable, in essence. All these are skills, and all these things can be learnt. And if you want to be connected to someone who's profoundly gifted in this area, flick me an email and I'll send you Madison's details. Okay, so that's it for now. Is there anything else on care? No. I'm going to leave it there. That's it for now for the nature of care. Talk soon.